water in it. I believe this is the oil filter. Holy shit. Yeah, this is the oil filter. Betcha. Look at that. Oh yeah, that's an oil filter. Got a big one of that. Yeah, there's water in this. It doesn't look like it's super, like there's a heavy amount of water in it, but there's water in it.
The sludge?
No, it's just old oil. See, the John Deere oils of the day, alright, originally they didn't have all the high detergents and shit in it like you got nowadays. So motor oil then was kind of one standard weight, and it wasn't really, I mean, it was the best for what they had of the day, but compared to conventional oil nowadays, it's almost useless, because there's a reason you used to have to change your oil every 2,000 miles in your pickup truck. When nowadays you can go 10,000 miles. You know? And this crap is very, it doesn't like to sit a long time with old oils, so they probably don't look the best. Let's try this one right here. Oh yeah, look at that yummy shit. Holy crap. Look at this. There's actually not that much water in it. But there is a lot of old crap. This is definitely old motor oil. This is that old, there's a little bit of metal flake on this, not much. So this, the lubricity of this oil actually ain't that bad. And I assume this oil is probably 20-something years old. You know? You can see the chunks of metal and crap right here. And I assume most of this is just because I'm sure the top of the cylinder, or not the top of the cylinder, but the inside of this engine on top, because this is a John Deere horizontal engine, but on the top of this, which would be up here, you know, condensation has collected over the years and rusted the inside of the cast, which really ain't all that big of a deal. I mean, it'd be easy to clean up, and I ain't really gonna rip the motor apart to clean it up, because it really ain't that big of a deal. I'll just have to change the oil 2 or 3 good times right away. But most of that should get caught by the oil filter. So instead of doing a full maybe 250-hour oil change, you know, or even 150-hour oil change, I'm not sure what the manuals dictates, but instead of doing a normal service, I would do it maybe after 5 or 6 hours, which will get expensive because I believe this thing takes quite a bit of oil. So the other thing that people don't know is, I believe the oil weight on this is 30. So nowadays you get something like 5W30, 10W30, 15W30 weight oil. Back in the day, this was just SAE 30. That's all you had, one solid weight all the time. You could use a 10W30, 5W30 in it nowadays, but a lot of old antique John Deere guys, they won't. They'll buy SAE 30 oil because that's what John Deere wanted of the day. Now, in this day and age too, here in 1956, they weren't quite using hydraulic oils either. What you would consider your conventional hydraulic oil nowadays. It was actually the same as the motor oil. It would have been SAE 30 weight oil. My biggest concern pulling all this apart and getting the oil out of here was I was hoping I wouldn't find water. And I there was a little bit of water in this, which I can see because it's very slightly gray. It's not even really a milky color. It's very slightly gray, the stuff that's coming out now. But everything else was solid black, which is good. It's a very good thing. That means that even though the exhaust manifold may have been uncovered and other shit may have gotten into the cylinder, like leaves and crap and stuff like that, that means that no water got in the cylinder. Because if a lot of water would have got down into that cylinder, what it can have the tendency to do is leak past the piston rings. Even as tight as they are, over a long period of time, that stuff could leak past the piston rings, and what will end up happening is it'll get into the motor oil. There is quite a bit of chunks of metal though. But from what I see, some of it just looks like old junk. Some of it's like leaves. And the rest of it looks like rust flakes. So, let me get some sockets and some ratchets, and we'll take this pan off and see what's under here. And the starter band has rusted off. There's the rust on the starter plate. Roach eggs and all kinds of. You see it's rusted off here. I might actually be able to fix this. We'll see what we can do. There's the starter. This is how you would remove your starter and get it out. You have to remove this plate. You take, I think it's 3 bolts off the front here, and this whole starter slides back. And you can see the starter bands have wore off it. I'm probably gonna have to either get this whole entire armature rebuilt, or if I can find an old guy that still knows how to do that shit, or will do that shit. And if I don't get this armature rebuilt, I'll just have to see if I can find another one. Either this is an oil plug or that's antifreeze, and we're about to find out. And sadly, that's an oil plug. Yeah, that's not good. This is gear oil. This is why you smell. This is why you learn your smells of your fluids. It's definitely gear oil. So this is transmission right here. You should always learn the smells of between motor oil, hydraulic oil, gear oil, all different kind of antifreeze. You should be able to smell antifreeze. So this, I can smell it and I know that that's gear oil. Actually, it seems like there was a little bit of water in it, but it was almost immediately that the water stopped coming out as soon as I pulled the plug. The water did not last long at all. The water, I assume this tractor is either at an 80, so the motor oil and the transmission, or the motor oil and the hydraulic oil would both be non-detergent SAE 30 weight. The transmission is probably going to be an SAE 80 weight, but 80-90 would work just as well. You can go to Tractor Supply and buy what they call antique 80 weight or antique 90 weight. You can also go to your local John Deere dealer and pick that stuff up as well. So the last one's back here. This is underneath what the main axles. And I assume that this is strictly, I lied to you. This is also transmission right here. So this is probably full of gear oil. There's one more plug back, so there's 4 plugs total. From what I understand right now, looks like there's 1 engine, 2 transmission, and 1 hydraulic. So let's get into the next transmission one. Move this bucket out of the way. That's all water. There's still water coming out of it. Now the oil's coming out. There was a lot of water in that. There's still water coming out. Look at all the water coming out of that. It's definitely gear oil though. Gear oil and water in here. So, yeah, there's about an eighth of an inch of oil here on the surface, and the rest of that was water. That's about a gallon of water, maybe a little bit more, that was in there. So I'm sure I have rust build up inside the transmission, but thank God oil usually sits on top of the water, so it would mean that it would keep most of the rust containment down to the bottom, but hopefully there was enough residue from the old oils in there that it really didn't rust anything, and I believe that's probably what happened. So there's one more plug back here, way back over here in the corner, which you probably can't see because the bucket's in the way. There's one more plug here. That would be, I assume, to be our hydraulic plug, and we're gonna find out. Coming out. There's some oil in this, but it actually looks like there wasn't hardly any oil in here. So I usually get rid of all my oil in this old 55-gallon drum I got from work. I'm not going to use that. We will use this. And then we take this stuff and we feed it to the cows. No, I'm just kidding. No, usually we just keep it and then take it to the recycling center and get rid of the safety. So I'm also putting on that cover that I got in the mail, at least temporarily, so that I can at least keep more water from going into my hydraulic system here. I don't need any more water going in here than I already got that's gone in here. My other problem I have is I have no exact idea, quite sure how I'm going to get these off. And what I'm thinking about is possibly welding on another bolt, welding on a nut to this so that I can get nuts on these old studs to take this old seat off. These are long gone, but I'm going to try to probably do that to these as well, so I can pull these out and pull this plate off to at least replace them. There's the old cover, the old hydraulic cover, and as you can see, that is well worn out. And these bolts actually didn't come out all that hard like I expected them to. I expected to fight them, and I actually didn't really fight them at all. Here's my new, what would have been the generator bracket. This came off I want to say, this is the early Model 60s this came off. And you can see the old one here is broken, busted. So that new one will get put on there. I still got to take this water pump off, which I'm not exactly quite sure how that's going to be done, but it's going to be done. And the other thing I'm kind of concerned about, I don't know how it's going to go, is the old power steering pump. I'm not sure how that's going to come together, because it's rough. It's rough, folks. It's rough. These pipes are rough. Even across the other side, where they come in, it's just kind of rough. So we're going to see what it takes to get the old oil out of this. I have no idea how this assembly system works. I assume it works kind of like a car's power steering pump, but I have no idea how to even change the fluid out of this, or what kind of fluid is even in it. So we will find out. We will find out. So this plate's pretty well beat up and ate up. I'm probably just going to try to order another one, and if he doesn't have one of these,
what I'll end up doing is just taking some sheet metal, cutting out what's wrong with this, and then replacing it, and then welding it. I bevel it, both the edges, weld it, flatten it out, and then it should look almost original. The only way you'd be able to tell was from the inside. And then what I'll do is, like I said, I'll bevel both sides of the cut and the plate and weld these both inside and out, except I don't think I will grind down the welds I do on the inside. I might, but I might not. We'll find out. But here's the old starter cover plate. Now you can also see that the 60 is back in the air. I think last time, in the last video I made and put up, the 60 was on the ground. It got bumped by a trailer, so it ended up on the ground. And actually, I think all the 60 videos showed it was on the ground. Since then, I've put it back up on blocks because I went out and bought a new 3-ton low pro jack. So it made it a lot easier trying to get this thing back in the air. I used the John Deere 40 to pull it out of the barn and then back in. I pulled it all the way back again and then pulled it back to where I wanted it. It's a lot sturdier on the blocks that it's on, and I tried to get it to as close to level as I could. The front end's still a little higher off the ground than the back, but it's awfully close to perfectly level. As you see, I got two 2x4s and a 4x4, and then I just have a 4x4 on this side. So it's pretty well leveled out, sitting where it's sitting. So we got the 3 bolts out of the starter. I just got this link off. Surprisingly, that wasn't as hard as I thought it was going to be. Now I'm just trying to get this starter out. The starter is longer than the opening here, so I'm sure there's some magnificent way to get this darn thing out, but I haven't quite figured it out. Well, I'll be darned. What a fucking pain in the ass this is. Oh. Boy, I had to fight this one. It weighs 6 tons. It's froze up. Let's see how crap these are. Oh yeah, those are froze up as well. This will have to go to a guy so he can rebuild this armature. And That's my only option with this thing. It's so froze up. Clearing all this water. It's a Delco Remy 12 volt starter. Really? 12 volt starter, huh? I wonder if that has a 12 volt generator. So this tractor, this is how you would start it. When you get on it, you press this pedal down. Okay, there's a big old spring underneath this pedal. This pedal actuates this rod right here, which would have been connected right here behind the flywheel. It would go down, okay, on this end of it. It would grab onto here, on the starter. All right, and what happens is, you press down, it'll pull this back. When it pulls that back, it'll depress the switch here, okay? And when it depresses that switch, okay, it makes contact between two copper electrodes in here that cross what would have been positive coming in, or negative, I'm sorry, negative coming in and going to it. These tractors used to be positive ground, okay? These tractors are all positive ground. So negative would have been your hot wire. And it would contact the two copper electrodes, which would start turning your armature over, which at the same time that it does that, okay, these Bendix, these starter Bendix right here, that's what this is called, on something like that, or even on that tractor, what happens is the weight of that, there's little cut gears, cut slots in here, that when that starter starts to move, it turns this Bendix up. That doesn't happen on the John Deere 60. On the John Deere 60, this lever right here controls this Bendix. So when this lever is pulled back, it also slides the Bendix forward that's on a ring in here. And it'll slide the Bendix forward, and when you get off the pedal, it pulls the Bendix back again. That's actually how the John Deere 60 works on their Bendix. 12 volts. That's going to have to be looked up. That's a 12 volt starter. Right, and I understand that just because it's 12 volts don't mean nothing. You can apply any kind of voltage to starters for the most part. Obviously you wouldn't want to apply like 24 volts to a starter, but a lot of these old tractors, it didn't matter if a lot of what the old farmers would do is convert to 12 volt from a 6 volt. But this is a Delco Remy . Oh, be doggone. Would you look at that, folks? Look at that. Look at that, folks. Holy crap. This is a 12 volt generator. I did not know that. Y'all are learning just like I am. That is a Delco Remy 12 volt generator right here. Yep. This is a 12 volt starter. This is a Delco Remy 12 volt generator. And I'd like to figure out what this puts out. And I'd like to get this thing rebuilt. Depending on the amperage this thing can put out, I'd probably get it rebuilt, because you can see it's froze up. It spins a little bit, but it's froze up. But if I can get this thing rebuilt being 12 volts and it's putting anything out like, I don't know, 40 amps, I might go back to the original generator. But it'd have to be putting out at least 40 to 60 amps coming out of this. If it's putting 40, 60 amps out, we'll go back to the 12 volt generator. But that's cool. That's cool as shit. I did not know that. Learn something new every day. So, from the really quick research I've done, apparently, from what I understand, all the John Deere 60s were 12 volt. They had two separate kinds of 12 volt generators though, or more or less voltage regulators on the top. So this is a 3-wire voltage regulator. I guess they say the better voltage regulator was the 4-wire. They say this puts out about 20 amps, okay? And I mean, I guess it's all fine and dandy, but 20 amps is not enough for what I'm going to do with this. So the other thing that I have to contend with is they say it's more reliable and less of a hassle if you go to the one-wire alternator system, that the aftermarket kit that Steiner tractor sells. So, or just go to a one-wire alternator, even for like an old Chevy engine or something, you know. So, unfortunately, I won't be putting the generator back on. It would be cool for kind of like keeping the appearance original, but we will go back to, and we will go to an alternator. It'll be a one-wire negative ground alternator, and switch the tractor from what I assumed the last time it ran as a positive ground because of the generator. So it ran as a positive ground tractor. Will be switched to a negative ground tractor, and then most of the reason I'm worried and concerned about that is if this was just going to be a running tractor that I would use to maybe fool around the yard with or something like that, I think I would just keep the generator on it and have the generator rebuilt. But because this tractor will be used in Christmas parades and stuff like that, and I like to run a power inverter to LED Christmas lights and stuff for different things I can put on the tractor and whatnot, that will not happen. So I need that little bit of extra oomph for the tractor to be able to run that power inverter and be able to keep everything else going on it without killing itself and drawing too much power. So this is my plan. This is where we're gonna go. I am done for the night on this. Got all the oil out of this thing. I think I'm gonna pour some diesel fuel in it and let it sit for maybe a day, and then try to drain it out and see what kind of that crud I can get out. Depending on how much of that crud can get out, we might do that a couple times. I just don't want to leave the diesel fuel sitting in there too long because it'll expand all my gaskets, and then when my gaskets come back down from expanding, they could start leaks all over this tractor, and I'm not really trying to replace every engine seal and seal in this thing. So what we'll try to do is we'll pour diesel fuel in it and try to clean out most of what we can out of it. Then I'll put some oil in it and everything, which is going to get expensive, but I'll put some conventional oil in it because it's cheaper than the old antique oil that you would put in this stuff. So I'll put conventional oil in it. I'll run that for maybe 20 hours. I'll put like 20 hours on this, and then I'll dump all that out, all that brand new fluid out, and then cycle it in for the antique fluid. That way it'll get the last of this little crud out of the engine and transmission and the hydraulics. So slowly but surely we're getting there. It's still coming. Hopefully we get a little bit farther, and hopefully we can get some different things done. We'll see here. We will find out, folks. Until next time, we're done with the John Deere 60 for the night.